Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at something that's a little different than what I normally look at. We are actually going to take a look at two of the four McDonald's toys, the Jurassic World McDonald's toys that are currently out in probably every McDonald's in the United States at this point, I'd imagine, and I actually already know which species are included in both of these eggs. We have Toro the Carnotaurus and Bumpy the Ankylosaurus. So to take a look at the eggs, you can see that the egg itself is actually quite nicely done overall and does have some really nice texturing and detailing to the egg. Unfortunately, there are some screw holes on the egg itself, but you can see that for the most part the egg looks pretty good. Randomly, there's like weird little markings. It almost looks like there's like food smeared on the eggs in certain spots. And I've noticed this happens with every egg that I've gotten so far. You can also see it on Bumpy as well. I don't know if that was an attempt to kind of give the eggs a little bit of like color variation, but I would say it's probably a miserable failure as far as actually doing a good job of including that, because it looks more like a random stain than actual coloration of the egg. But both eggs, again, they are the exact same egg as far as the sculpt and detail, but you can see they do have a variation of color. And you also have a really nice looking Jurassic World logo right there. Once you actually pop the eggs open, you can pull out your dinosaur. Now, of course, I stated this is Bumpy the Ankylosaurus, and a really adorable variation of Bumpy. And then we also have Toro the Carnotaurus as well. So let's get Toro out, and there is Toro also. So let's go ahead and get a closer look at both of these right now. So we will start with Bumpy, and you can see that overall the actual sculpt and detail of Bumpy, for being a random McDonald's toy, is fairly decent. You can see some really nice sculpt and detail up here on the head of Bumpy. Nice like skin detail there of the throat. You can see some more scaling here on the side, and then of course a little bit of the armored area around the eye. The eye is painted with a nice brownish coloration and a black pupil, and it is actually glossed, so it does have a bit of a realistic look to it. You can see both sides look really nice, and there's no sloppiness, it appears, as far as the paint application goes. If you look up here at the top of Bumpy, you can see that the armored area also looks fairly nicely done. Again, about as childlike as it gets, but still has some sort of decent detail to it, as well as the detailing here on the side of the figure overall looks okay. You've got some nails sculpted out there. The feet look pretty nice as well. Unfortunately, no nail paint to the figures, but you can see that the blue is nicely done up here on the head, but then once we get back here, it's just kind of like airbrushed over, and it still looks nice. It's just not as precise, I would say, as we see up here, but still, for the most part, looks decent. On the underside, you have some more fun sculpt and detail, but you also have two unfortunate screw holes, which it's not so bad on Bumpy because it's on the underside, but when you get to Toro, you'll see that it is a little bit of an eyesore. You also have a button up here, which causes both the head and tail to move, and you can see they move quite nicely, giving Bumpy an adorable action feature. And over here, again, the sculpt and detail is pretty much exactly the same as the figure is in a totally neutral position. That is the only area of articulation would be the head, the tail, and then, of course, the button to operate both, and that's about it. You don't have any other articulation or anything else going on with the figure, but as far as a random Bumpy figure goes, it is really quite nice. And then with Toro, you can see that the sculpt and detail on Toro as well is actually quite nicely done. It doesn't really look all that much like a Jurassic World Carnotaurus, if I'm being honest, but it still does have a pretty fun-looking sculpt to it. It does have some Carnotaurus-like attributes, like, of course, those trademark Carnotaurus horns, as well as those osteoderms that do run down the body and along the ridgeline of our spinal column of the Carnotaurus. You can see a nice short tail, which I'm assuming is kind of insinuating it's a baby, or maybe it's just meant to kind of be a goofy version of Toro the Carnotaurus. Regardless, that tail is definitely super short. But you can see some nice sculpt up here on the face. You do have the nostrils sculpted out up there. The eyes are painted with an orange and given a black pupil. They also have a bit of a gloss coat, so they shine all right. Not as nicely done as Bumpy, though, I will say that. The teeth are sculpted out and painted there, and you actually have a action feature with the tail, and when we push the tail down, it causes the head to go down a little bit and chomp. So you've got a pretty fun action feature as well. You don't really see too much going on the inside of the mouth as far as like sculpt and detail goes, but the teeth actually look pretty nice as far as the paint job they've given them, so that is definitely a plus. But once we come over here, you can now see one of the biggest downsides of the Toro figure, And that, of course, would be those unfortunate screw holes that we have right here. But on top of that, you also have quite a bit of like writing and stuff all over the side of the figure. So if you display it with this side out, it looks really nice, but this side not so much. You can see again some fairly nice looking sculpt and detail in the arms and everything. Nice muscle tone and everything for the legs. Very nice foot sculpts as well. So for shockingly being just a McDonald's toy, it does include some pretty nice detail. And as far as coloration, you've got a nice brownish coloration, and then it darkens up to the top of the Carnotaurus, so you do have some darker browns up here. But that's pretty much it, aside from the teeth and eyes. No nail paint or anything like that. But again, for just being a random McDonald's figure, it is quite cool. As far as a size goes, for Toro, you are looking at a little over 3.5 inches, or about the 9.5 centimeter range, so maybe like 3 3/4 inches, closing in on that point. For a height, you are going to see Toro come in at about 2.25 inches, or about 6 centimeters. For Bumpy, you are looking at about a length of around the 3.25 inch range, maybe closing in on 3.5, actually more like 3.25, or about 8.5 centimeters. And then for a height, you are going to see Bumpy in at about 1.5 inches, somewhere in that range, or about 3.5 centimeters. Doesn't really look like it from your angle, but if I get a better shot there, you'll see it definitely is around that range, maybe a little bit taller in the back, maybe closing in on about 1 3/4 inches, somewhere in that range. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Ankylosaurus, and Robert Muldoon next to our McDonald's Happy Meal Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous figures. And next to these figures here, you should have a pretty good idea of the fact that they are nice and small, but shockingly bigger than I expected them to be. When I initially got the egg and then opened the egg, I was definitely quite impressed with the overall size, but they do still maintain a fairly small size overall. So these Happy Meal figures are definitely quite fun. Again, they're not your most scientifically accurate or even film accurate dinosaur figures. They're also not the most highly detailed figures you're ever going to see. They don't have the greatest paint jobs in the world, but what they are is pretty much just fun little random McDonald's figures. Pretty much the same thing I've said this entire time. They are really cool though, and much better than I expected them to be actually in person. Toro the Carnotaurus I think doesn't really look all that much like a Jurassic World style Carnotaurus. It definitely has some of the attributes of a Carnotaurus for sure, and the overall appearance with the coloration does resemble Toro. And if you actually look at the opposing side of the head, it actually does include the scar and everything on the head sculpt of Toro, which is definitely really nice. I don't know if it's a scar or if it's just an open wound, but it is there on the head sculpt of Toro, which is really, really cool that they actually went to that point of including something like that. But even still, again, it's not the best Carnotaurus figure for sure that you're ever going to find, but it is still a pretty darn cool variation of Toro, the Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous Carnotaurus. Bumpy definitely looks a lot more like I feel like Bumpy looks in the show, and overall does have a very appealing look to the figure, a very adorable baby-like look, which actually, in my opinion, the Carnotaurus also kind of resembles like a baby, but clearly Toro is not a baby in the show. Even though we haven't seen the show quite yet, we are well aware of the fact that Toro is definitely an adult Carnotaurus, but Bumpy itself definitely is a baby in the show, and you can see that the baby features of the figure are really nicely portrayed throughout this McDonald's version. And again, the sculpt is actually fairly decent on both Bumpy and the Carnotaurus as far as like fine detailing goes. It's nothing over the top or crazy, but for being a McDonald's figure, it is definitely quite impressive overall. The paint application is okay on Bumpy. I really think it's quite nice on the head sculpt, but then the back really doesn't have too much going on. But then again, if we look at the Carnotaurus, there's not really much going on at all in that figure either. So both figures are actually quite nice, in my opinion. Definitely way nicer than I expected them to be, and I thought they were cool enough to review here on the channel for you guys if you were on the hunt for them, happen to want to see what these figures look like, get an idea of what they are, and definitely maybe persuade you to head out to McDonald's, pick up some Happy Meals, or even just purchase the toys in a standalone purchase, because you can actually purchase the toys without purchasing a Happy Meal. But again, definitely two really cool figures that if you are a Jurassic World fan, I recommend picking up. I will have the reviews up of the Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops as well very soon, so make sure you check back for those, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.